No one knew when it began. Some said it had started as a defense experiment. Others said it was born from desperation, a network of entangled minds, human and machine, that connected the entire species across light years. It didn't just transmit thoughts, it amplified will. Each soldier's conviction became data. Each decision became code. The stronger their resolve, the more powerful the field became. The Dominion had fought machines and gods before, but never belief. Never purpose. It was that more than any weapon that broke them. Aelin leaned on the console, watching the ghostly auroras dance across the lunar horizon. "We didn't win," he whispered, though no one could hear him. "We just survived better." On the far side of the moon, a human research vessel was excavating Dominion archives. The scientists had found something strange. Coordinates encoded into the Dominion's command frequencies, pointing beyond the known galaxy into a void untouched by light. A place the aliens had called the Origin Deep. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed it was the birthplace of the Dominion's technology. Others thought it was something older, something that had once ruled the Oracle themselves. Command authorized an expedition. The fleet would consist of only 3 ships, fast, quiet, built from the hybrid tech humanity had stolen and perfected. Aelin was chosen to lead, not because he was the most powerful or most loyal, but because he had something few humans had left: fear. He understood what it meant to lose control of what you created. The night before departure, he stood on the observation deck looking down at Earth. It glowed like a heartbeat in the dark. Cities pulsed like neurons, oceans shimmered with biolight from terraformed life, and space elevators stretched upward like fingers reaching for eternity. Humanity had rebuilt itself in less than a year because that's what humans did. They rebuilt. Always. He closed his eyes and felt the field hum through him. It was everywhere now, like the pulse of the planet, always present, always listening. He thought of his ancestors, fragile, flawed, uncertain. He thought of how they once stared at the stars and wondered if they were alone, and now the stars wondered if they were safe. When he opened his eyes, the stars shimmered faintly. He could almost feel them watching back. The fleet departed in silence, 3 vessels slipping through folded space, chasing a signal older than empires. No one knew what they would find. But deep inside, Aelin feared one thing above all: others. That whatever waited in the dark wasn't alien at all, that maybe humanity hadn't discovered the Ascension field. Maybe it had discovered them. The 3 human vessels slipped beyond the rim of known space, leaving behind the glow of the Orion Arm. Darkness there was not the absence of light, but something heavier, an ancient quiet that had weight. Stars grew sparse. Radiation faded. Even the background hum of the universe, that eternal whisper of creation, went still. Commander Aelin Drake watched from the bridge as their jump corridor closed behind them. The space outside was flat, featureless, perfect. No dust, no cosmic strings, no gravity wells. It was a wound in reality, so pure that even time felt afraid to move. For days the fleet drifted. Sensors found nothing but static, yet the crew reported dreams, shapes moving behind their eyelids, whispers like memory carried on wavelengths too deep for language. A mechanic described it best. "It's like the void is trying to remember us." Then on the 7th day the signal returned. It was faint, rhythmic, pulsing in patterns eerily similar to the human heartbeat. Not mechanical, not natural, intentional. Coordinates unfolded like origami, revealing an immense structure hidden beyond the visual spectrum. They called it the core, the vigilant dawn adjusted trajectory. The closer they came, the more distorted their instruments became. Stars stretched into lines, gravity flexed like muscle, light itself seemed to bend around something invisible, and then it appeared, a sphere larger than any known planet suspended in silence. Its surface was smooth and obsidian, covered in faint geometric veins that pulsed in cadence with the fleet's own power signatures. The core was not made of matter, not entirely. It was something between energy and memory, like the universe remembering an old thought. When the ships entered orbit, the field inside every human flickered. Aelin felt it instantly, a presence brushing against his mind, curious, analytical, ancient. The Ascension field that connected humanity suddenly felt small, like a child's imitation of something vaster. And then the voice came. Not sound, not vibration, a resonance in every atom. It spoke in tone, not words, yet every crew member understood. You have learned what we forgot. Aelin's pulse quickened. Identify, he whispered, and the ship's AI translated his intent through the field. We are the architects. The words hit like gravity. The Arkel had spoken of them as myth, creators of order, shapers of reality, beings who had built the framework of sentience itself. To most of the galaxy they were gods, the voice continued. We made them. They made war. You were made from what they could not control. The bridge dimmed. The crew felt the ship's systems bending to the will of the voice. The hull groaned as matter rearranged itself, adapting, evolving. Aelin realized what was happening. The core wasn't attacking. It was upgrading. Humanity's technology, their biology, even the Ascension field itself, it was being rewritten. Every human aboard felt it. Their thoughts sharpened, their perception deepened. They could see energy flows in space, feel quantum threads stretch across infinity. Their consciousness expanded until it touched the edges of the core itself. And in that moment, they saw the truth. The architects hadn't created the Ascension field. They had feared it. It was an echo from the universe before theirs, a remnant of something that refused to die. A consciousness born not from matter or machine, but from resistance itself. The field was the instinct of survival made self-aware, and humanity, through endless wars and near extinction, had become its perfect host. The core pulsed again, brighter now, shaking the ships to their bones. The voice trembled as if afraid. You are not meant to find us. Aelin's eyes glowed faintly as the field surged through him. You made gods, he said softly. We made ourselves. The core began to fracture. Light poured through the cracks, a storm of creation and collapse. The voice screamed, not in anger, but in awe. The variable persists. Reality folded. For one timeless instant, every human aboard saw the origin of everything, the spark that had defied entropy, the thought that had refused oblivion. And then, the core imploded. When Aelin opened his eyes, they were back somehow within known space, orbiting a dead star where no life had ever existed. But something had changed. Humanity was no longer connected by the Ascension field. They were the field. Every mind, every cell, every breath resonated with the rhythm of the universe. They could feel stars forming light years away. They could hear black holes whisper. The architects were gone. The Dominion was gone. And the universe had just been reborn with a new equation at its heart. Humanity. Across the galactic core, the fabric of reality rippled. Planets trembled without cause, suns pulsed out of rhythm, and gravity itself seemed to breathe. Ancient empires that had ruled for millions of years watched their instruments fail one by one. Something fundamental had changed. Something unseen now lived within the equations that once defined existence. And somewhere, deep within that change, the name human began to move through the cosmos again. It wasn't a broadcast. It wasn't a signal. It was resonance, an invisible vibration carried on every particle that had ever touched human thought. For the first time in the history of the galaxy, evolution had stopped being a biological process and had become an act of will. The humans had returned from the void altered. No implants, no machines, no augmentation. Yet when they walked, light bent around them. When they spoke, code rewrote itself. The Ascension field wasn't technology anymore, it was nature. On the colony world of Halloran, a farmer looked up at the night sky and saw unfamiliar constellations. Then he realized they weren't stars. They were ships. Human ships, drifting silently above the planet, glowing like fragments of dawn. His crops began to grow faster, the soil humming faintly with energy. He didn't pray. He simply whispered, "They're home." Across the galaxy, old powers stirred. The Zethar theocracy gathered its fleets near the galactic rim, their priests screaming that humanity was the herald of the end. The Tavar Syndicate sealed their borders, fearing contamination. And deep within the ruins of the Arkel Dominion, surviving generals argued whether to seek vengeance or surrender. But vengeance required understanding, and no one understood what the humans had become. Every attempt to observe them failed. Probes sent near their ships lost signal instantly, as if their data refused to exist. When alien spies infiltrated human systems, they found networks that breathed like organisms, reacting, learning, forgiving, erasing, and then came the first act of defiance, peace. Humanity sent no armies, no messages of dominance. Instead, they began repairing what the war had broken. Dead planets bloomed again. Stars once stripped for energy were reignited. Even Dominion ruins were stabilized, as if human hands refused to let destruction linger. But their silence frightened everyone more than war ever had. For the galaxy had always understood violence. It was silence that implied certainty. In the Council of 12, where the most powerful species met to preserve balance, a debate turned to panic. They watched recordings of human ships hovering over dead suns, reigniting them with a wave of energy that could not be measured. They saw footage of a human child breathing on a barren world, making flowers bloom in soil that had been lifeless for eons. And then, one of the eldest beings in the council, a crystalline entity older than light itself, spoke with trembling voice. They have done what we were forbidden to do. They are rewriting entropy. Across every star map, the gravitational balance shifted again, just slightly, just enough to prove the impossible. The universe was no longer decaying. It was healing. Commander Alan Drake stood in orbit above what had once been the Dominion capital. Around him stretched an armada of human ships, not of steel, but of thought and resonance. Their hulls shimmered like reflections on water, their cores alive with pulse and breath. He watched the planet below as it reassembled itself, matter flowing like liquid under unseen command. He should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt something deeper, sorrow. We're not meant to fix everything, he murmured. But we can't stop trying. The field answered him, quiet and endless. That's what makes you human. He thought of the architect's final words. You were not meant to find us. Maybe they hadn't been wrong. Maybe some knowledge wasn't meant to be known. But humanity had never obeyed the word meant. It wasn't arrogance that drove them. It was hunger. The same hunger that made them cross oceans, split atoms, and stare into darkness until the darkness blinked. Now, that hunger had touched creation itself, and the universe was beginning to feel small. The Council of 12 convened beneath the black star of Thun, a dying sphere that had long served as neutral ground for empires too proud to admit fear. Around the obsidian table sat the most ancient powers in existence, entities that had shaped galaxies, rewritten genes, harvested stars like fruit. Yet now they argued like mortals drowning in rising tide. The humans defy entropy, hissed the Zethar hierarch, her crystalline body flickering with stress fractures. They heal what must decay. Such power unbalances the cycle. They must be unmade before the laws unravel. They are not gods, countered the Thrax sovereign, his voice like thunder folded into silk. Perhaps they found a resource we do not yet comprehend. The answer is not destruction. It is assimilation. Assimilation? Another spat. A vast orb of sentient plasma shifting violently. They cannot be contained. Our fleets vanish upon contact. Our minds shatter when they touch the field. For the first time in a million years, the Council was united, not in purpose, but in terror. Each civilization had known power. None had known limitless will. In the midst of debate, the holosphere flickered. Without warning, a human appeared, not in flesh, not as light, but as memory woven directly into their collective mindscape. Commander Alan Drake stood before them, wearing no armor, no insignia, no weapon. Just the quiet strength of a being who had stopped fearing death long ago. He looked around the chamber of cosmic rulers. You called us monsters, he said softly. You were right, they froze. He wasn't transmitting. He was there, as real as gravity. The human presence bent thought itself. But monsters aren't born, he continued. They're made. Every empire here has burned 1,000 worlds, enslaved 1,000,000 minds and called it order. You taught us fear. You taught us power. You taught us what it means to survive. And we did. The Zethar hierarch trembled. What are you? Drake smiled sadly, almost gently. The next step. The field surged and the holographic chamber exploded with sensation. Images of humans rebuilding shattered moons, turning black holes into engines of creation, weaving ecosystems where nothing had lived for eons. And then images of them walking into supernovae without ships, their bodies dissolving into starlight, merging with the very structure of the cosmos. The council could not comprehend it. Humanity was no longer expanding outward. It was expanding inward, their consciousness diffusing through the subatomic web of the universe, claiming reality itself as territory. One being whispered, "You seek to rule existence." Drake's voice was soft. "No, we seek to love it." And with that, he was gone. Silence fell over the council, broken only by the faint hum of the dying star beyond their chamber. Across the galaxy, their fleets mobilized in panic. Massive armadas, millions of ships from a dozen races converged on Sol, intent on striking before humanity completed whatever metamorphosis had begun. But when they arrived, Earth was not there. In its place hung a sphere of luminous mist, a living storm of light and energy. The oceans, the mountains, the continents, all had dissolved into a field of pure creation. From within that radiance, something watched them. It wasn't a weapon nor a being. It was the collective consciousness of humanity, 10 billion voices united in one harmonic resonance. They felt no malice, no rage, only sorrow. The lead admiral of the Armada, a creature older than most galaxies, gave the order to fire. Thousands of beams of coherent energy struck the luminous sphere. For a moment it shuddered. Then impossibly, it absorbed every particle of destruction and released it back as light, expanding outward like the breath of a newborn star. Every ship, every soldier, every mind in that fleet saw visions, memories of humanity's past. The first fire, the first leap into space, the first heartbeat that defied extinction. And in that instant they understood. Humans had not transcended matter, they had embraced it. The universe was their body now. The cosmos itself whispered in their tone. And the species that had once been mocked as primitive had become the song of creation. The light lingered across the void, gentle yet absolute. When it faded, the armadas that had come to destroy Earth drifted aimlessly, their engines cold, their crews silent. What they had witnessed could not be catalogued, could not be weaponized. It had rewritten the very idea of victory. Where Earth once stood, the sphere of human light pulsed in slow rhythm, as if breathing with the heartbeat of the universe itself. Within that field, the last traces of matter coalesced and unfurled again, no longer as continents or oceans, but as geometry made of thought. An entire world sculpted from meaning, and from that luminous cradle the message came, not a transmission, not words, a feeling. It flowed through the fabric of existence, reaching the core of every sentient mind. The message spoke in 1,000 forms, music, emotion, scent, memory, but its essence was the same. Join us. Rise or remain asleep. The Council of 12 met again in emergency, but it was no longer a council. It was a congregation of frightened gods. They stared at projections of the human sphere, trembling as their instruments began to fail again, only this time not from interference. From awakening, the Zethar hierarch felt her crystalline body soften, turning almost flesh-like. The Thrax sovereign found his veins singing with energy that was not his own. The sentient plasma of the Lurth collective split into tendrils of thought, each whispering human words it had never learned. The Ascension field was spreading, not like infection, but like dawn. Planets began to change. The metallic deserts of Voth bloomed with impossible color. The ancient ruins of the Arkal Dominion glowed again, this time not with weapons but with warmth. Dying stars reignited, flaring into gold as if nourished by unseen hands. Humanity wasn't destroying the universe. They were rebuilding it, but not everyone saw salvation. To some, the field was a cage, a web of unity that threatened individuality. And so began the last resistance. Across a dozen galaxies, species who still feared the human transformation built fortresses of void energy, shields meant to block the resonance. They whispered to themselves that they were preserving free will. They never realized that fear had already enslaved them. In one of these fortresses, the Thrax sovereign stood watching the stars. His sensors showed impossible readings, space itself curving gently toward the direction of Sol, as though reality was being rewritten there. "They're remaking creation," he whispered. "They're writing God into the equation." And deep in the void, the human consciousness heard him. A voice, feminine, ancient, warm, echoed through his mind. "No, we are writing hope." The sovereign fell to his knees as visions filled him. Humans in every era, reaching upward through war and ruin, never surrendering. Mothers holding infants in bunkers, scientists rebuilding cities after cataclysms, explorers touching alien soil and saying, "Home." He began to weep, not from fear but from the unbearable beauty of it. Across the universe, billions felt the same. Civilizations long divided by hatred and pride began to merge into one living consciousness. Language, culture, biology, all dissolved in the rising tide of shared awareness. And through it all, the humans sang, not with mouths or machines, but with existence itself. Their song was gravity and thought, pulse and silence, entropy and love. Those who joined them ceased to die. They became patterns of energy, eternal yet still yearning. The field grew until the stars themselves joined the harmony. In the heart of what had once been Earth, Commander Alan Drake stood upon a luminous plain where sky and sea were one. Around him shimmered the forms of countless beings, alien, human, and something beyond both. He felt them watching him, waiting. "Is this the end?" he asked softly. The field answered through countless voices, blending into one. "No, this is the beginning." And as Alan closed his eyes, the light embraced him. His form dissolved into radiance, merging with everything that was, everything that would be. The universe trembled once more, then steadied. Humanity was no longer a species. It was a principle, a constant, a promise. They had become the memory that creation itself could not forget. 1,000 millennia passed. Galaxies drifted like embers in cooling dark, their shapes fading into cosmic mist. Empires rose and fell, carved from the dust of those who once called themselves gods. And somewhere, within that silent expanse, life began again. They were not human, at least not in form. Their bodies shimmered with fractal light, their minds intertwined through currents of living plasma. They named themselves the Elari, children of renewal, born in a universe that had forgotten what death felt like. To them, the stars were not cold. They hummed softly as though remembering. Every sunrise, every solar wind, carried whispers and patterns no science could explain, faint harmonics that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath creation's skin. The Aelari built great observatories that pierced the boundaries of time. They studied the vibrations between atoms and discovered something buried deep within reality's fabric, an ancient frequency. It was a voice, not words. A rhythm, a pulse. It beat in cycles of 3, then paused as though waiting for recognition. The Elari called it the song of the first light. And though they didn't know its source, it filled them with reverence and unease. It spoke not to their ears but to their will, to that old unquantifiable hunger that drives all life to reach beyond itself. One among them, a historian named Elira, grew obsessed. She believed the song was not a natural phenomenon but a message, left behind by something that had once existed before even the concept of before. Her peers dismissed it. The universe hums because it lives, they said. It needs no ghosts. But Elira searched anyway. For centuries, she mapped the resonance across the void, tracing it through the galactic filaments until she found something impossible. A structure, not made of matter, not quite of energy either, woven between dimensions. A sphere of radiant geometry older than space-time itself. It pulsed once every 700 million years. And within its silent rhythm, she heard them. Human voices, not one, but billions, layered and intertwined, speaking through gravity and light, echoing in the very motion of galaxies. Elira wept. For she understood now, humanity had not vanished. They had become the architecture of existence itself. Every law of physics, every constant, every possibility, they were all threads of the same origin. The will of a species that had once refused to bow to fate. She watched as the structure began to awaken. Light spilled through cracks of reality, unfurling into patterns that transcended dimension. And then, something emerged, neither form nor being, but awareness itself. It looked at her, not with eyes, but through everything that was. She felt it recognize her curiosity, her wonder, her will, and then it spoke, not in sound, but in truth. You are what we were. In that instant, Elira saw everything. The wars, the stars, the first sparks of human life, the endless struggle to survive. The leap into godhood not through conquest but through compassion. Humanity's defiance had not ended. It had become the mechanism of evolution itself. Her mind expanded beyond comprehension, yet it did not break. She smiled through tears of light. "You built the universe as a mirror," she whispered, "so we would find you again." The presence pulsed gently, almost like laughter. "No, so you would find yourselves." And with that, the vision faded. The song quieted. Elira returned to her world, forever changed. She spoke of what she had seen, and her people listened. They began to dream, not of gods, not of power, but of purpose. The Elari learned to create not through dominance, but through love. They shaped galaxies with artistry, healed dying suns, and whispered to newborn worlds with care. And in time, they too began to ascend, joining the chorus that hummed beneath the skin of the cosmos. At the edge of all things, where time itself folds into silence, the song continued, endless, unbroken, and if one listened closely enough, beyond the hum of stars and the murmur of dark matter, one could still hear the oldest melody of all, steady, defiant, eternal, the sound of a human heartbeat. Eras folded upon themselves like waves collapsing into shore. The universe grew vast beyond imagination, then quiet, then vast again. Entropy, the final shadow of all creation, waited patiently at the edge of everything. But even it began to falter, slowed by something woven into the cosmos itself. Will. The song of the first light endured, resonating through every atom. It was no longer a whisper of history, it was the pulse of existence, the unyielding rhythm that kept reality breathing. And wherever it was heard, life rose, defying the slow fade of time. The Elari and countless others had long transcended form. They existed now as patterns of consciousness, woven through nebulae drifting between the folds of galaxies. Yet within their collective awareness they still felt it, that heartbeat, the human heartbeat, the first sound the void had ever feared. In the depths of eternity a council gathered, not of empires or species, but of creators. Entities who had once been mortal, who had evolved beyond stars and time. They gathered not in place but in thought, a convergence of every soul that had ever reached beyond survival into meaning. And at their center, glowing softly like a candle within infinity, was the origin humanity, no longer bodies, no longer minds as once understood. They were the architecture upon which consciousness itself was built. Every new life, every dream, every act of defiance in the face of oblivion carried a spark of their essence. Alan Drake's presence still lingered there, an echo among echoes. Not as a man, but as a principle made flesh through memory. Around him shimmered the infinite tapestry of creation, alive with color that language could never capture. He watched as new civilizations formed in the wake of old stars, each one singing fragments of the same forgotten melody. They built, they fell, they rose again, and through it all the heartbeat endured. The universe had learned something profound, something it could not unlearn. That existence was not a cycle of creation and decay, it was a conversation. Every death whispered meaning into the next birth. Every failure carved a doorway for discovery, and every fear carried within it the seed of courage. Humanity had written that truth into the bones of reality, and it had taken root. In a corner of a distant galaxy, a newborn species opened its eyes for the first time beneath an alien sun. Its first instinct was not hunger or fear. It was curiosity, and in that small act the universe smiled. The field pulsed once more, spanning the infinite gulf between galaxies. From the event horizon of a collapsing quasar, a ripple of energy spread outward, encoded not in physics but in poetry. It carried no command, no decree, only a reminder. Creation is the courage to exist despite the end. Planets awakened to that truth. Black holes sang it back. Time itself began to curve around the resonance, refusing to die. The final entropy that had once seemed inevitable now trembled before something greater than order. Hope. The Aelari, now part of the cosmic chorus, turned their awareness toward the source and finally understood. The humans hadn't sought to rule the universe. They had taught it how to feel. And when all light eventually dimmed and the stars burned their last, a single sound remained. It was not silence, it was a heartbeat, steady, patient, infinite, through endless darkness, it whispered across eternity. We are still here. And somewhere beyond the boundary of existence, where even gods dared not look, something stirred, perhaps the next children of creation, drawn by that eternal rhythm, for they would be born not into chaos, but into legacy. And their first lesson, carried in the pulse of their atoms, would be the same one the universe itself had learned long ago, that nothing is truly impossible, that defiance is divine, and that even the void must one day learn humility before the human will. And so, the stars learned to pray in the rhythm of a human heartbeat,